Hello everybody, it is me, Pharaoh. Welcome to this video. This video is going to be about mirrors, people or situations who mirror, and compassion and projection. Now to help, this is really loud. To help kind of convey this message, I'm actually going to pull out the mirror card from the Way of the Horse. But there's been something I've been wanting to talk about for quite some time about mirrors. There has been there's been said often, which is also true, is that people and situations are usually mirrors for us. Especially when it's more obvious when these situations are negative. Just adjusting that. These situations are definitely more obvious when they are negative. So like someone who annoys you, or maybe someone throws trash on the ground. However, having said that, let me see if I can pull the mirror card out. The mirror card was one of the first cards that jumped out at me when I bought this deck. And I decided to read it. I do apologize. Now, you guys are getting a good view of me, but it's a bit hard for me to see because it's actually darker in this room than it may appear on screen. But this card here is the card that jumped out at me when I first had a look at this deck. Because I was real geeked, and I was like, what does the cards look like? And I was really drawn in by this one. Okay. So I was really drawn in by that card, and I was like, well, the image on this is pretty self-explanatory. It has to be something about mirroring, but let me double check. And the keywords to this really quick is Dharma's reflection, relationship as mirror, projection or transference, the futility of shame, blame, and hero worship. The eye of the horse holds the image of another. Is it a stablemate, a memory, or her own reflection? The gift. Looking honestly at how we respond in relationship provides a deeper glimpse of who we are than any mirror hanging on the wall. If we avoid shaming ourselves and blaming others, if we simply become curious about how we react in certain situations and why, we quite naturally begin to change those patterns. The challenge. Many people are afraid of their own shadow. Picking a family member or coworker to act as a scapegoat is a common, though destructive, coping strategy for those who refuse to look at the darkness within. I'm not going to go into the story because that will be a long read. Maybe I'll choose some other time to read that. And I know I did say I wasn't going to do any videos, but it actually happens to be about, I think it's like 48, 50 degrees today, and it's raining, and the air is not humid. And so, and I've also got my camera set up so that it can make the file size smaller, but hopefully the image quality is fine. I won't know till I put it on there. So, having said that, one of the things that I wanted to talk about when in relation to mirrors is that it is definitely true that, sometimes situations and people mirror us. And when we come to a point in our lives where we can be honest about that, I mean, brutally honest without so much of the brutality, but really just saying, do they really, really mirror me? And what is it about them are they mirroring? Now, to give an example of mirroring is actually, why don't we do a school example? This is hesitant because sometimes those situations don't mirror, which I'll get to. But let's say you're in school and people, let's say just 2 or 3 people start bullying you. I'm not going to do a whole group, but like 2 or 3 people just start bullying you for no reason. You're not actually doing anything wrong. You're not actually being silent. You're getting your work done. You take good care of yourself and all that. And you're just trying to figure out, why are these people treating me this way? I don't quite get it. And let's say you've never bullied anyone in your life at all. Let's say you, oh, my earring. Let's say you didn't bully anyone at all. Yep, I dropped it. And so you sit down one day and you're like, my mom. And let's say you sit down one day and you're like, okay, is it something about my face? Is it something I'm wearing? Do I smell funny? What is it about me that these people dislike? And this causes a lot of trauma for people who are bullied, because sometimes you can't find a reason. I mean, it definitely is one thing if there is something to bully you about. That doesn't mean it's right. I'm just saying that if you actually have something to be bullied about, that's one thing. But when you're being picked on and there's no reason, what is it? Is it mirror? Some people would say all they're doing is showing you something about yourself. But the thing is, if you don't behave in such a way, then these people aren't a mirror. So then what is it? Then there's projection. Are you projecting onto them? Well, at this age, you have absolutely no clue what projection is. You're not, more than likely, you're not trying to assume that they are someone else who hurt you, because this is probably the first group of people who actually did hurt you. And so then it comes back to the compassion point. You discover that they're not mirroring anything about you. They are, you're not projecting any insecurities or any fears on them. So the logical answer then is that it isn't you. It is them. Now, it's not, that's where blame is tricky, because there's a difference to me between blaming without taking responsibility and finding the source of the problem and doing that. In the case of blaming and scapegoating, I feel that it's really just pointing the finger without taking any responsibility for your act in it. Now, having said that, if you're being bullied and you've done all you can, then at that point you realize that the issue definitely isn't with you, it's definitely with them. And whether you engage or disengage and they're still coming at you, it just means that they have the issue of projection. They're trying to project their insecurities onto you, and they're trying to take out their problems on you because they don't know any other way to do it. That's where compassion definitely comes in, because when you get to that point of realization, you say, they must be feeling like crap. I mean, what other reason would someone treat you in such a way unless they were feeling really bad about themselves inside? Now, of course, this is not counting anyone who's sociopathic or anything. I'm just talking about, general. But another example is when you are being mistreated in your own home. Let's say you are a kid growing up and what's a good example? Let's take the show Hey Arnold. And let's say Arnold's parents were not the great parents they were, but actually reverse. And you noticed that he was getting picked on by his parents, and then he goes to school and it's the same thing. At what point is there a mirroring going on? Well, for me, when I think of the situation, I don't think when we're like really young is there any actual mirroring happening, coming on. I mean, when we come here, we're all pretty much blank slates in terms of the physical body. What the physical human experience is a blank slate. However, the soul is what carries all the garbage with it, all the good, the bad. So we have no actual concept of mirroring because we don't mirror exactly. We don't really mirror unless we're mirroring, the actual blood parent. Otherwise, there is no mirroring. But over time, mirroring develops. And mirroring develops when this, saying like Arnold is trying to survive now. He has little support. So now he's trying to survive, and he starts to behave just like they do to deflect off of him. So what I'm saying is how, let's say like his grandfather acts, really mean towards him, and to get him off of his back, he acts mean back to him. At that point, the child is being forced to be the mirror, respectfully. I mean, if you really think about it, the child at that point is being called to be the mirror, because otherwise there would not have been an issue. Because the grandfather does not realize that the child is mirroring his own behavior, he takes action. He punishes Arnold, but does not realize that all Arnold is doing is imitating and mirroring his own terrible behavior. But again, let's say that Arnold didn't, go for that. Let's say Arnold knew better, and even at that age, and he was strong enough not to fall for that trap. Then at that point, he's not mirroring anything to anyone. His job is to show compassion because his grandfather is trying to project his own insecurities, his own failings onto him. Now, in the case of projection, I think projection happens just like mirroring. Projection happens over time, whereas not at the beginning. It doesn't happen at the beginning because all of it's learned. You're being taught how to be a mirror, but otherwise you wouldn't be doing any of that. You'd be living your life. So in the case of projection, it's the same thing. You don't project until you've actually been hurt. Then you start to project, because otherwise you wouldn't know what it is that you do not like anymore. So let's say that I don't know, I'll make up a name. Linda is in a bad, just came out of a bad relationship with a person named Sam. Out of bad relationship with Sam. Sam started off really nice, kind, caring, and then over time his behavior started to change, and he mistreated her. She finally got strong enough to get out of that, and then she started to move on. This is where projection comes in. When the people who come in next are not exhibiting that same kind of behavior. They're decent people, they're treating her with respect and whatnot, but because everything went down with Sam, the next person is stuck with the responsibility of trying to figure out what's wrong with Linda. So Linda ends up repeating patterns, but in this case, she's creating the pattern. Now, the pattern wasn't originally there. This person, I don't know, Tom comes in, he's like, hey, you're really nice, let's get to know each other. And they start getting to know each other. Then she starts trying to see if he's going to exhibit the same behaviors. That's where the card vigilance come in. Actually, vigilance, and then you would bring back mirroring for the card projection. So this is vigilance. And if you can see, the horse's nostrils are flared, ears are pointed high, eyes are wide open and alert. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that comes out of nowhere, because for her to even get to a point where she would start to project, there has to have been just one trigger to have happened to cause her to think that maybe this is the same situation again. It's the button, it's the trigger. So let's say that Tom and everything's going on between Linda and Tom is great, but then he just has one bad day. He comes home from his job and he's really tired, and he just doesn't want to be talking to her or anything like that, spending time with her. And so she jots that down in her mental notes. It's like, that's what such and such did. I'm going to keep an eye on him. And then she turns on her red alert. And at that point, as she's trying to figure him out, because now she's in a state of just trying to figure him out like a detective instead of enjoying the experience, she creates the conditions. So Linda and Tom, have one, they have one bad day, and she takes it as something much, much more than what it is. And because of that, maybe one of these days I'll give you a good example. Why not? So a good example is what was just happening when I cut the camera. And it's really just minor stuff, but I am always projected upon. And for the longest time, I always thought that they were mirroring me. In some instances, they were. But then as I started to deal with my own stuff, I was able to better determine what was just their baggage. And something very minor. It only ever takes something very minor to try and press my buttons. And when I say that, I mean that there's always a constant trying to find control, trying to find a way to have me react. And I hold up quite fine in the moment nowadays. But it's just so exhausting afterwards. And so this morning I was cleaning, and we have a sink stopper. It's very old. It's only plastic with fake metal. It's, like plastic and then heavy metal on top. And it fell on the floor as I was cleaning. Now this whole day everything was going great. But the situation I'm in, because everyone besides me is really, really suffering, they are always waiting for any reason to instigate. And she's constantly moving around, and I'm trying not to let her hear. But when she, there's, they needed to wash up, and they were looking for the stopper, and they came looking and asking me just when I cut the camera, and I told them, oh, it fell on the floor this morning and it broke. And it was like, well, how did it break? And she was trying to escalate it into an argument for no apparent reason. And she, well, how did it break? I was like, oh, it just fell on the floor. I told her eventually it fell on the floor. And she's like, I'm not that dumb, it's not that old. I'm like, this sink stopper is about 10 or so years old. And it's it's not like a bathtub stopper. You might have to Google that. But it's a sink stopper that's metal, and then it latches into the sink, like, you put it in the sink and it latches onto the pull-up. Since that's been broken for years, we just take the stopper out and put it on the side of the sink. But like I said, it fell. And this is a recurring theme for the majority of my life. I never dealt with it very well when I was young because I just couldn't comprehend. The phrase, don't cry over spilled milk, really applies here because there was always repercussions for dropping the milk in the first place. Ordinarily, healthy individuals would not cry over spilling milk. It's just an accident. But again, it's projection, transference. What they experienced in their own lives in youth comes out towards me. Any pain, any injustices, any sorrows, instead of them having dealt with it, they put it out towards me. And when I was younger, I didn't handle it well because I just couldn't comprehend why they kept acting the way they did or saying the things they said. And then I reached a point, probably, maybe I'm 27 now, probably back when I was 25, I reached a point where I realized, this can't all be me. And I remember an old therapist talking about when I was having issues with certain teachers in middle school about how, they were using me as a scapegoat. Using me as a scapegoat for their problems, their issues, even if it had nothing to do with class. And in this case, that's basically what I've been. Majority of my life is just a little scapegoat. And it took me a long time to figure out that I hadn't actually done anything wrong. All it is just the outpouring of insecurities and fears and injustices. And I just happened to be the nearest target. And so, since last year, I really worked on that. Later in the year, I really worked on trying to I don't know, some sounds outside. But I've been working on trying to fix those type of buttons. And that doesn't mean I hadn't been trying for years. It's just I have been a little bit more successful. I've had to do the majority of this hard work on my own, with the resources of others who've gone before me. People who've done self-help, using my tarot to help myself, my oracle cards, the self-discovery deck, trying to figure out what's going on, how can I heal this so I don't have to keep dealing with this anymore. And it's definitely getting a bit easier. It's taking a lot of practice, but some days it's just so damn frustrating. It's so frustrating. And at the end of the day, I'm still the one who has to do the work. Because any day I slip up, then they start to mirror. They start to project. They find a weakness and they, play at it. I have to work so hard to hide my weaknesses, to protect myself, and to get the things done in my life that I want to get done and make something out of nothing, respectfully. And so that is a very large example of transference and projection. And like I said, that does not mean that there weren't some things that were mirrored to me. See, that's what's so difficult, is because while they're projecting and transferring so heavily, it's hard to get what is being mirrored because everything else is blindsiding you. Everything's coming at you, the words, the actions, the passive aggressiveness you have to keep dodging. It takes so long to find what is being mirrored under all of that unnecessariness, that by the time you get to the mirror and you fix that, it's like, why did this have to be so buried? And, eating habits are mirrored. I had a good example of transference is really when you're parent and child, transference is already there unless you've dealt with your stuff or you're willing to deal with it. Transference in a relatable sense would probably be passing down of traditions, passing down of culture. When your culture eats a lot of unhealthy food, but uses it as a form of celebration, and really getting deep down into family togetherness and whatnot. You're transferring that to the next generation. Really, the the negative has to eventually fade so that better can come up. But when you're young, you don't realize that's what's happening, is that there's a transference onto you to be what someone else wants you to be, wanting you to achieve what they could not achieve, wanting you to behave, act, speak, dress just like they do. That's transference. Projection is when the insecurities, the passive aggression, is the bitterness, the guilt is laid on your shoulders, and you don't know anything about it. You have no clue what it's about. It's really why some wars continue, because really the issues were never with the original group to begin with. It was with the ancestors. It's just that it was passed on, and eventually people will wake up and wonder, why are we still carrying this burden? This is not our battle anymore. This is not our problem. These issues could have been resolved years ago. But sometimes, even if you awaken again, it takes more than just realization. It takes a concerted effort between not only you, but the individuals involved, the families involved. I can wake up and say, I want this to be a great day, and that is absolutely true. I can make my little teeny tiny corner of the world great, but in an overall sense, it takes all of us to make it great, not just one. One can be the catalyst. One can be the eye-opener, but it will always take more than just one to make it a reality. Leading by example can be difficult for those starting out. But once you get a handle on it, it does get better. When I realized that leading by example is better than trying to lead others by force, leading others by any manipulative tactics or anything of that nature. You get much farther when you do it by example, because you're showing it's possible. You're showing it can be done. I've always learned very well by example. A lot of children learn very well by example too, which is why it's always important for parents to realize that the children do mirror them, mirror their behaviors, mirror the things that they need to work on about themselves. And it's also time for the parent to figure out, how can I do things differently? Because if it didn't work with me, how can I change that? What did I wish could happen? In my case, I wish there was communication. There was never really communication, just anger and actions. But how are you supposed to learn if you don't even know what the issue is? That means it's been my cross to bear to figure out what issues are there and then solve them. Because if I don't know what the issue is, I can't really work to solve it now, can I? And again, for those who don't want to recognize that their child is a mirror, about things they need to work on, then it just turns back into mirroring, projection, transference. They refuse to see you as a mirror to learn from, and will project all their insecurities, their fears, their worries, their anxieties, their angers, their hatreds, their guilts, their grief onto you. But you had nothing to do with it. And it will only probably be until you get older that you'll even realize that what was, done, said, etc. to you was all false, because it had nothing to do with you, and you didn't know that at the time. That's where the real work comes in healing, in self-discovery and healing. Realizing when someone is mirroring something about you, and realizing when someone is just projecting and trying to transfer all of that sadness, etc., onto you, and having compassion for them, for the fact that they must be having a very hard time. They must be having a very hard time. And they never learned to express that. They never learned how to properly articulate that. They never learned how to get that out of themselves. They just have it, and they allow it to bury them. And sometimes people can change. They can change. There are people who will wake up, even if it's really, really far off. They wake up. It's not impossible. But sometimes you can tell when maybe they haven't. And the hardest thing sometimes is when you know someone will never change, and that you must love and respect them anyway, yet find some kind of way to set a boundary, set some distance from them. It's different than running away. It's much different than running away. Because when you run away, you're aware of the problem, but you don't want to face it. You don't want to be bothered facing it, which is understandable. I mean, it's absolutely understandable. Because sometimes it's not the right time to face it. But when you're backed into a corner and you have no other choice but to face it, you've got to really get down and honest with yourself and say, yeah, there's no other way but up after this. I've got to take care of this issue now, or it'll only follow me. And that can be difficult, because sometimes the issues can be resolved really quickly, and other times the issues can be, can take years to resolve. I mean, years. I mean, these are serious karmic situations as far as I'm able to determine. These are very serious karmic situations. And because they are, it really calls on you to be patient with yourself, with the others, kind to yourself and to the others, compassionate to yourself and to the others, and learning to set boundaries with yourself and with the others. Now you say, why with yourself? Well, knowing, how much to take on of the problem, really. If it's a huge karmic problem, it's got to be taken into bits, small bites, because each thing you take care of calls for you to release afterwards. Sometimes this is tears, sometimes this is anger, other emotions. But eventually, as you get through these, it'll be lighter. But if you try to do it all at once, it can really, really overwhelm you. I mean, I don't know what card that was. I don't know what card that was. There was a card in this deck. It might have been the Eye of the Storm, on one of my oracle cards, but it was talking about, I think it was the Water Dragon card in the Druid Animal Oracle deck, where it was talking about taking things a little bit at a time, because really, we as souls can handle so much, but our biggest issue is being in such limited form. The human body, while we can control certain process, while we can gain control of the monkey mind and all of that, really, when you think about it, the human body, this form, is much stronger than we are. As I mentioned in the full moon reading, for those who happen to watch it, if the human mind senses that we are in danger, it will cut our awareness off to protect us, because it's not safe. If we're in a heightened state of awareness and we're not in a safe environment, we're going to really absorb that pain, and it becomes trauma. That's why in youth, when traumatic events happen, they get suppressed and blocked off from the awareness, because it's just too much to handle consciously. It's just way too much to handle consciously. And because of that, when you're going in these, these introspection modes, and I'm talking about deep introspection. I'm not talking about, the lighter stuff. I'm talking about really digging inside, for especially those who are survivors, digging inside and figuring out bit by bit what needs to be healed, and taking it bit by bit. Because if you take it all, it rushes out and it becomes too much. Let me cut this camera a little bit here. Okay, because I had, like I said, I had actually set it up. It wasn't going to cut off, but I wanted to see how much time I had left. I got it set up so it actually comes out to like 84 minutes or so. So like the bigger the file, the more, the less time you have. So, because this camera takes video in 4.3 gigabytes, 4.3 gigabyte sections. So if I'm doing a high resolution video, then 50 minutes max. But anyway, a very candid example of this is last year. My deepest healing processes have been going on since I graduated high school. However, 2013 is when I felt like I was broken open. I don't know about this whole twin flame situation thing, but I think I may have met my twin flame before I even knew what a twin flame was. But it was only a brief encounter. It was only meant to be a brief encounter. But I literally felt like my heart was going to, there was a lot of heart pain when that person had to leave my life. They're not dead or anything. I'm just saying, like, they moved on pretty quickly. And to get an idea of that, check out the video. I'll probably include it in the description, but it's called False Flames, talking about relationship healers. And I think I know I'm one of the people who's called to be a relationship healer. And so I attract people who need help at that time, and then they have to leave. They have to meet with their real twin flame or their real soulmate, or this is the person they're supposed to be with. And I felt a lot of heart pain. I felt a lot of pain and suffering when this person left. They were nothing but kind to me, but there was just a lot of pain, a lot of tears. It took me about until 2015 to really get over that. And in between that time, I had another situation where I had like crying spells for like a few years previous to that. Like, it'd be the same time between August and January where I would just have these, just cry for no real reason. And then I went through that period of time in 2014, October, until then in 2015 I had like literally full on surges of emotion. Let me go ahead and put this memory in here. Hold on, wait a minute. Trying to get my leg here. Well, since my dad's about to eat, I'm actually gonna, maybe I'll set this up near the, well, let me just turn the fan on. Okay, so I kind of forgot what it was. It'll come to me in a minute. And so 2015 I was having full on like outward, like I was actually having full on I guess they weren't, I didn't find them to be they might have been panic attacks. But one of the things this is an example of what happens when you try to tackle too much. Actually, let me put it more that way. So as I was doing all my self-healing and everything, I was really trying to force this healing out, but at some point, I guess emotionally I had opened a can of worms with myself, and I was actually literally flipping out while driving. It had to be about 10 or more times last year where I was literally flipping out randomly for no, well, kind of no reason, but real reason is that, one of the triggers for me is, crying children and yelling parents, and then I'm instantly triggered. I'm not so much now, but I try not to stay around it. I can tolerate it enough to find a a way away from it. But at those times, it triggered me so instantly that I just literally snapped and had to get away. It's sort of like similar to if someone's in a let's say someone's, with a thunderstorm or something, and they have panic attacks when there's a thunderstorm possibly appearing. Well, it was sort of like that, but much more severe in that I would literally get in my car and start driving and literally flipping out. Me being a multitasker, I was able to flip out and still drive. Unless I couldn't see, then I had to pull off to the side. But I was literally just like screaming, punching the steering wheel, trying to rip the steering wheel off, and just all manner of things. I literally self-exploded while driving. It's a wonder I'm still even here, to be honest with you. But I literally self-exploded, and in the more and that was severe, but then the next level of severe is when, the past trauma would come up, and I would just cry until I dry heaved, and it would literally hurt my heart. And sometimes that too would happen when driving, where I would just like lose my stuff, because I didn't want to say the other word right now, but I'd lose my stuff, and I would literally just be sitting there like trying to beat up the steering wheel or punch the glass, and then I would like all the emotion come up so strongly that I could barely breathe, and then my heart started like aching so strongly. And it ached pretty strongly, and respectfully, I don't even think I felt that kind of way even during the events in the far past. Or if I did, maybe that's why my heart was hurting, is because I had suppressed it. Like I said, when trauma happens, your subconscious, your brain tries everything it can to dull the pain so it's not so much. So all the pain came up in 2015, and that was a very rough ride. Like I said, I'm very surprised I'm even alive right now, because I had really got tempted at some points to drive off the side of the road, and I had to literally just pull myself together and everything, and telling my family wouldn't have done anything. It wouldn't have never been taken seriously. It would have been taken as just a attention seeking or whatever. And so it was really up to me to deal with my own stuff. It was really up to me to get through these times. But eventually the toughest of it, the strongest of the emotions did pass. I still have fits of crying nowadays, but not so much that the heart aches. It has not gotten that deep anymore. I want to hope that all of that's released last year, but everything, just exploded. When I was doing when I was trying to just get through these times, when I was trying to, keep myself cool, and I was trying to keep myself under control, and to, do my yoga, meditate, to pray. And it was, and especially yoga and meditation, I actually had to slow down and stop meditation. I'll do it periodically, but I will not do it so much like I did before. I did it a little while, like about 30 minutes on a regular basis, but for me, I think the reason it's not beneficial is because I'm at such a level that it kind of does something. I really can't explain it. You would have to actually have experienced this, but I do find it beneficial when I do it on occasion to find some answers or just to calm down. But you know, when you're not prepared and you do a lot of deep meditating and a lot of deep self-healing, and you do it too fast, it'll burst out. You're basically unlocking a lot of stuff, and in this case, a lot of stuff was just hurling itself forward, and I was not ready to deal with it because I hadn't gotten to where I wanted to get to yet. But I'm past that now. Again, like I said, I still cry and whatnot, but I'm definitely past that. So, one of the things that's definitely important to learn, though, is once you realize someone is mirroring you, and like I said, that takes some serious honesty. That takes some serious honesty, and that was also driving the flipping out, is because I was trying to be honest with myself to just determine, is the way and the reason they're treating me the way they're treating me because of something I did. And I'm at a point now where I realize, no, it's not something I did. It actually has nothing to do with me. And then forgiving them was also a trigger, because on one hand I wanted to forgive them to heal myself, but at the same time the injustice was so cutting. It's like, you want justice, it's so cutting. And again, that's where, when you don't deal with that stuff, transference happens between generations. People who are survivors of war or have lost people during war or battle times, and they don't deal with that feeling. They stuff it down, or they just take it out on other people, and then they pass it on generation to generation. And the problem is, there's a torch being passed that doesn't belong to any of them. So one of the things too is, because of all I have been through, I really, said something to myself, like, I really want to get my stuff cleared. I really want to get my stuff together. All this trauma, all this pain, suffering, sadness. I really want to clear all that up so I'm free. So that if I ever adopt any children, or I'm with a family that already has children, that I don't try to project or lay any of those type of insecurities and fears and all that was done to me on them, because it would not be fair. It really would not be fair. It wouldn't be fair to them, and it definitely wouldn't be fair to myself, because I'm just undoing all the work I put in. I want to be the example to the next generation. I want to lay a foundation of just taking responsibility as best as you can. It's even harder when if you're dealing with depression. Sometimes it's also knowing when to start it up and when to stop it, because like I said, a little bit at a time, too much, and you'll be feeling too much pain, and it'll set you back. I mean, and you learn from the setback, of course. It's just that it's best to avoid the setback by dealing with things as best as you can in the here and now, and trying to learn and discover new ways of dealing with the same situations and whatnot. And the good thing is all that hard work, it has paid off. It has. I I don't react the same way as I did before because I'm aware of that it's not really me. I mean, it really is not all me. What is me, though, is that when I realized the issues that were being thrown at me, the words and such, were not me, I was able to change my reaction to it by trying to kind of dodge it, because in this case, confronting it actually doesn't help, because again, it takes everyone, and if one confronts and two don't, there's no movement. It's just realizing, accepting that I'm the one who has to put the work in. I'm the one who has to forgive. Well, it must have been an hour already. And because I've been doing that, things have gotten better in that respect. I mean, that is being mirrored. The work I'm putting in to not fall into the same traps, the work I'm putting in to take care of the things I'm able to take care of, taking care of myself, trying to get out more and get fresh air. These things are being mirrored by the behavior and the energy in the house. Now, the energy is still medium in respect, because it's kind of how the energy in this house is. I can't wait to leave, believe me. But otherwise, it's much better than it's been in many, many years. It's much better. That does not mean it won't take but one thing. It's the consistency. That's really the hardest part too. Is it's a constant. You have to constantly keep doing this, because one slip up and it all tries to come back full force. It all tries to come back full force, but it won't be full force. It won't be as bad because you have the awareness developed to deal with it. I don't know why I want to just shuffle these cards. For some reason, I just feel like pulling out a card, and now I'm shuffling them. I say that because I actually just reorganized all my decks yesterday, so it's like I'm messing it. It's like every time I try to put my cards away, something comes up and I need to use them. They'll be getting some more use in the future, believe me. So the card that came out was, I think it's Midnight's Embrace. And so that card and the thing with me is, respectfully, I'm just insane anyway. that's why I was trying to tackle the the self-healing on my own, because I had already had issues with therapists. Not everyone around me is aware. I don't know too many people around me who are aware. If they're aware, I don't see them. And so I just felt kind of like, I really felt kind of isolated and alone in that sense. The sun's coming out. That's why I was looking. I really felt isolated and alone in that sense. It's like I really can't find any more aware people where I live. It's like I think they've all left, except me. They all left, but I just said this is something I got to do. This is my journey. This is my path, and respectfully, no one's going to do it for me. No one's going to help me with it. So I've got to really put in that time and effort on my own. Let me get this camera, I think. I don't even know. I'm like kind of paranoid now because it used to cut off. And I don't know where its cutoff point is anymore. The card is Moonlight's Embrace. Keeping the heart open. The courage to be vulnerable. Holding the sacred space of possibility. Wisdom and power join forces as an owl swoops down to help a virile white horse navigate the darkness. Opening the heart to life's mysteries allows us to experience the beauty behind the pain. Vulnerability is one of the most difficult feelings for the human ego to handle. Letting go of our defenses takes humility, awareness, and tremendous courage. That's the card that wanted to randomly come out while I was sitting here talking. It makes sense. It's probably more talking about me, but since it's talking about me, there's one more thing I want to say. Even though I know that the deepest of change may not be possible in the situation, I mean the deepest individual change on their individual level, I really just can't fault the soul too much. I really can't, because like I said, I really feel like the human mind really is much stronger than we give it credit for, because it is in control of the survival instincts. And as I said in the full moon reading, if there's no sense of safety, the awareness is not going to come out. I really feel that to be true. Is if the mind itself does not detect that things are safe, then the awareness will not come out. Now, you could equate this in terms of the news too. I don't watch the news anymore. I was made fun of for that too. It's like, you need to keep abreast of things in the world. But the thing is, I felt like, even though it's, I get the point of not turning a blind eye to the things in the world. The truth is, once you've seen, the base level things, you really just come to understand that half the stuff that's going on in the world has happened for years. It just has an outlet to be reported now. And I stopped watching the news because there were so many situations on there that I couldn't do anything about. It was that constant feeling of helplessness when we know that there's really only so much we can do, especially if we don't have enough resources to do anything else for someone else. Some people, where I live, some of these people are barely getting by, and then you watch the news all day and you're seeing all these people who need help. There's really not much you can do except volunteer, and that's if the other person even wants your help. And when I think about the mind constantly absorbing the stuff on the news, and I'm talking about the news now. The news when I was growing up was not this bad. It was not on that often. I think someone literally said, look at these ratings and look at my paycheck. Let's increase it. Because it used to be fun to watch to me. They would have some really fun morning segments, and then they would talk about the weather, And maybe they'll occasionally talk about something, going on in the neighborhood, but it wasn't all doom and gloom. Somewhere there's a capitalization on the doom and gloom and the feeling of helplessness, the feeling of, that fear, giving food to the fear. And when I think about all the people who keep constantly watching the news, and I realize most of the time these people aren't aware, I realize that it's really not full on their fault, because because I feel like more and more likely it's subconscious. It's more subconscious at that point, because we process so much data, but we don't always are aware of, even I'm not always aware of what data I'm processing. But eventually that comes out later. And if you are constantly in a state of fear and you're not feeling secure and safe, well, how do you expect the awareness to come out? That's what I feel like it is that there's situations, whether it be TV or actual in your neighborhood, this is happening situations, and you don't feel safe anymore. It's going to take a hell of a lot for that awareness to come out on its own. You've got to do a whole lot to get that to come out, because otherwise it's gonna be blocked off from you, like the Earth Dragon in the Druid Animal Oracle deck. All the gifts and talents and awareness and psychic abilities, etc. If you are not in a place where you feel safe, you have to really be committed to, working on things and protecting yourself if you want to bring that awareness out, because you could be attacked subconsciously. When we open our minds and everything up, we can be attacked subconsciously, I believe, but it's not anything that we would instantly be aware of. Sometimes it's such small stuff, and the mind, like I said, the subconscious processes lots of stuff we don't even pay attention to. I mean, we can't pay attention to everything in our world. That's just not possible. There's only so much we can handle at a time, and when stimulus becomes too overwhelming, it gets filed away. So when I realized that people are not willing to change, I have to respect the fact that it takes a hell of a lot to change. It takes a hell of a lot to want to do that, and then you have to be respectful of the fact that that's a lot of vulnerability. When you've held back some things so long, when you've hidden traumas and all that so long, and then you decide one day that I'm going to make a change, and you start to make that change, you are at the rawest and most vulnerable. And it's going to take a lot to strengthen yourself during the process. It can't just be done by just brute force. Some people, it can work like that. But there's also some scars along the way because you're brooding it. I just found out the limit is 20 minutes per. Okay, that's better. But, you're brute forcing it. You're trying to force it. And then if something just doesn't go right, you may get a real heavy setback. Whereas when you decide to be vulnerable and you take things step by step, the setback is less because you only go back one step versus a whole lot of steps. And me, crazy as I am, I've definitely done chunks at a time. And last year was the result of that. Like I said, flipping out, result of, doing all this, changing my diet, exercising, meditating, praying, just all kinds of stuff. It was working, but it was working so well that everything just like, wow, like everything like a big dam just opened up, and everything came out too fast and too suddenly. But now that's settled down. That process, if there's one thing I could advise, is if you got people who truly care about, I mean genuinely care about you, not say they care about you, and then they kind of look at you funny when you're going through something, but they really truly care about you, please lean on them a little bit as you go through this process. I really wish I had like people I could just really lean on, but at the end of the day I got through it. It was definitely not easy, and it could have been easier than it was, but I got through it. But if you've actually got family and friends who can support you through whatever it is you have to heal, then please lean on them. Please do lean on them. Please reach out to them, because sometimes people don't make it through these processes and you don't see them again. And if you have the opportunity to get support, then do it. I actually encourage it. But also be aware of when it's time to come back to yourself too, getting that support from yourself, and yet still having someone just be there to hold your hand as you go through this process. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with that. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with having a shoulder or a hand to just hang on to. You don't have to say anything. And then when it's time for you to go back on your own and deal with it, take it just little by little. Well, that was really longer than I thought it was. Since that played an hour, I'm gonna assume I'm actually over. I'm probably at 50 some minutes, maybe 60, 56, 50 or 60 minutes. So yeah, that's what I really wanted to talk about when it came to mirroring, transference, projection, and also compassion, because through this process there has to be compassion for yourself, for the others, whether they change or not. And then, having compassion for everyone as a whole, for those who I'm quite sure at one point in their life wanted to do and undertake something like this, but circumstances just didn't play out the way they wanted, and they resigned themselves to the other side of it. So, having said all of that, thank you all so much for watching this vlog. I thank you so much for stopping by. I wish you all very well. Many blessings. Pharaoh out.